welcome to our moderator and our panelists. You'll know who they are as we go along with the introductions. We felt that this was a very important discussion to have at this time. At BELTRAIDE, we've been engaging with our private sector, especially the ones that we work closely with. And there are also many questions as it relates to exporting and how to keep afloat given the current situation. And so we thought it would be a good discussion to have to get some insights on how to navigate through the current pandemic and still maintain some successes and activities in the export market. So again, I'm extending sincerest thank you from BELTRAIDE to all the panelists and our moderator for today. And I think I'll hand over now to the moderator and we can get started.
Well, in that case, welcome everybody. We're doing things a little differently from how we used to a couple months ago, and it's actually quite nice. My name is Kay Menzies, and I've been asked to moderate today's session, so let's get right to it. What we'll have is, just for housekeeping purposes, is that we will have a couple of plenary sessions, or, well, the full plenary session is broken down in two. And the panelists will be called one by one to discuss certain aspects. I believe each one will have 10 minutes, right, Leanna? Each person will have 10 minutes, and we'll have a little quick Q&A period, and then after each moment, after each panelist has spoken, we'll have well, in between sessions, we will have a Q&A from the audience. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat section, and we'll go from there. With us this morning, to get right down to it, we have Dr. Leroy Almendares, Executive Director of BELTRAIDE. We have Dr. Dami Sananan from Caribbean Export Development Agency, Mr. Mario Umania from IDB, and from the private sector, we have Ms. Marissa Longsworth, VP Services from Chamber. Mr. Nikita Usher is here representing the Citrus Products of Belize Limited, and Mr. Otto Friesen will be speaking from BELCAR. So it's a nice mix of public and private sector to talk about something that matters to us all. Moving in, we'll begin with Dr. Leroy Almendares. I don't think you need any introduction, Doc? I think everybody knows you by now, but he's the Executive Director of BELTRAIDE. And so let's dig right in, Doc. You know, we're talking right now about global changes in demand and supply and the opportunities. You and I always talk about the opportunities that are presented in the COVID crisis. My question for you, starting off, is how do we pivot to take advantage of these opportunities, Doc?
Good morning, Kian. Indeed, we keep discussing this. Whether we have found our channels to discuss, whether it's LinkedIn or otherwise, and so here we are presented with this situation. And you use the word pivot because many have now thought about pivoting, but in some cases they still don't know how to pivot. All right. So I just want to quickly, if you will allow me, because it's important for us to start with a quick look at global changes, because I was listening to a speech from the DG of the WTO, and he put out some very interesting information. So if I could just share my screen here quickly. All right, what I have there, I was listening to that conversation, and he said there were two approaches. Now, I normally would include a realistic approach, but because of the uncertainties caused by COVID-19, there is an optimistic view that economic decline will be somewhere around 13% in terms of global trade, and the pessimistic view is that it will go probably as much as 32%. So the question then has to be, in terms of our part of the world, how does that affect us? And just quickly, a second screen here with some pointers. It says world merchandise, of course, and then all of this is, of course, dependent on whether or not, or when, or if a vaccine is found. We must also make mention of the fact that many times we focus, mostly on goods, but we're talking about trade and services as well. So those quick sorry, bits of information, I thought I would throw out there because it's important for us to take, and what will be the responsiveness by those who want to continue to engage in any economic activity. So I will just stop sharing this now. And just coming back to say that when we really think about it now, so I want to continue to see how I can pivot, but what are those things that we must look at? Because the pandemic has extended far beyond economics. I think too often we think about producing, not realizing, as they used to talk about in IT, there's an end user. And so overnight we would see how people work, how they shop, how they save, how they spend. That all of that has now changed. And so therefore, we must be focusing on a value-based economy marked by prioritizing long-term value and the needs of multiple stakeholders over a period of time. Because the pivoting talks about differentiation. Many times we hear about differentiation, but what does it really mean? I want to, really continue to supply the same product or supply the product. Is it just different packaging? Is it that I've changed the ingredients? Because at the end of the day, it's who consumes it. And the fact that with all the lockdown that has occurred, consumers have been behaving much, much differently. I mean, some have not left their homes. Some try to find places like, like Belize On, for example, to see how they can, my activity can be facilitated because I fear going out. So in Belize, of course, there is containment, but COVID-19 has not gone anywhere. And so right around us, and then you look at our region. In our region, I mean, take for example, not on our region, but let's go to tourism. And I know tourism continues to be beaten up, if you will. But if it contributes 42% to global GDP, and it's in terms of its revenue allocation to GDP, it's almost zero. So the question then has to be, how many have pivoted or were preparing and were pivoting? Because many times this is what happens. We become so comforted and comfortable, not realizing, and this is the word that the economists would use, an exogenous shock. It takes one external shock for something to happen, and you will actually see the immediate effects. What is the responsiveness, or what are the responsiveness of the public and the private sector? Because the public and private sector will have to work very, very, very closely. So even before the pandemic, some business leaders were called to think not only about the now, but what comes next and beyond. Companies already face pressure to act more responsibly, and the crisis only accelerated that. So we'll need to demonstrate that we can deliver benefits to society. It's not only now just consumption. You'd be surprised to learn that even when it comes to consumption, which is that big C, because if you take aggregate expenditure, consumption plus investment plus government spending, plus the trade imbalance, export minus import, consumption is the largest percentage, and that is what will create the kind of acceleration. And so therefore the consumer must have choice. How then, in terms of a pivot to create greater global activity, what are businesses, what are they doing, how are they doing? So there's likely to be even a resetting of the relationship. I listened to your show sometime, and I listened to my friend, the president. And we talk about the relationships, and we must be honest with each other in terms of what, because The enabling environment is created, but as a private sector member, I'm the one who trade. But private sector must understand, well, those who want to continue to evolve and expand, what am I expanding to? The economy shifted to health and wellness. How many entities pivoted to health and wellness? There's some who did. Now listen to what America did. America simply said, you know what, I will requisition. As a matter of fact, you will produce, but we will not export. Italy did the same thing. Germany did the same thing. They decided, I am now going to concentrate on ventilators and masks. And we have seen cases now where core competencies have been changed and strategized so that we can produce hand sanitizers. So the focus is still there, because health and wellness, you cannot, even no matter how smart or intelligent you may be, if my human capital is not healthy, that human capital cannot make the contributions that we would like to see made. So here are some, in terms of now the pivoting. We talk about differentiation. I just want to, believe it or not, these are just some, in terms of, we must create a flexible workforce. This is one. Companies need to create a more flexible workforce, looking at adaptable contracts, because again, unless, and it's true, we have transitioned to digital. I was listening to Jack Ma from Alibaba, and he was saying there's been, really, there's been a lot of traffic, but all of this traffic has come with the fact, and you say, many times who's speaking to them? Robots. So digitalization is now and is here to stay. Artificial intelligence is now and here to stay. So part of the pivot has to include that. It has to include that, because the utilization of AI and digital, and we have seen the transformation. If you take a look at all those who are now downloading and utilizing technology, we're talking about applications, you can basically see, just from a basic survey, how that is working. But it's still important that the end user, the consumer, that consumer consumes that which you are producing. So that's a part of it. Two, we must plan for an agile supply network, because I heard someone using disruptive supply chains, but believe it or not, unless you have vertical integration where you become your own supplier, and therefore you become less dependent, and as a strategy, it keeps your efficiency going. So the supply chains need to be stress tested against geopolitical risk, because unless we're talking solely about the domestic economy, then it simply means even then it might become more difficult. So the political risks must be minimized. We must look at shared, less distant resources. And of course, the creation, again, as I said, of an agile network. We must expect a new kind of customer. Companies need to increase digital customer access and ensure data analytics are optimized across data sources. So it means that we must find systems that are simple to use, easy to access, easy to understand, because too many times we make these things complicated. Apart from that, it requires financing, because financing is also important. So financial resilience, so the foundation of all this, the denominator of all this, of course, will require financial resilience, which will flow from lowering the cost base over the longer term. So there would be an increased liquidity in the short term, and using virtual scenario planning to cope with downturns and upturns in the medium term. Let me see if I can add one more. So we expect the new customer, because it's the new customer, basically, that will make it all work. So what are we looking at? If we take a look at all of this and how this will contribute to recovery, when we pivot, there is a recommendation that it will take, you hear about U recovery curves, you hear about Y, different V recovery curves. This one will take some sawtooth. Because if you look at this, the teeth of a saw, and you see how jagged it may be, that's the kind of recovery that I think that we'll be looking more forward to. And it takes resilience. So you will have a level of volatility, and that level of volatility will tell us more or less how we're doing. So in terms of again, I just use the word pivot. I want to use a synonym for pivoting, and I will just say adaptive management. We have seen where many entities now, some people, like I said, have diversified, but we must understand that the very resources that we use, capital and human and capital resources, must be adaptable or adapted when you pivot from your core competence, because too often you hold on to your core competence. COVID-19 is now causing us to pivot away from the core competence, because if they were not health and wellness related, then it simply means we must find ways to adapt. Many times it's very difficult because of cost. So cost efficiency will be something that has to be looked at indeed. So in essence then, if I want to be a part of the new normal, then it simply means that I have to adapt. I have to ensure that I take care of my resources. You know, people are being applauded. You find out that entities are being applauded simply because they have found ways to keep their employees. Remember, training, skills, and capacity building might become more expensive. So if you can find a way to keep them, that resource will help a whole lot in the recovery process. I don't know how many more minutes I have, Kay. Is my time up?
You are on mute, Ms. K, so he's not hearing you.
Whoops. Okay. No, how much time do we have for Dr.
I was checking to see if I had more time. So if I have maybe a minute or so since I passed, I wasn't checking. I think there was a timekeeper, but I haven't seen anything. But basically, the importance of building export resilience. Now, let us think about, let's take it out now from a micro perspective and take Belize, which contributes 0.0003 or so % of total output in terms of international trade. Our people, and I know that some of our private sector members are here. I know that the chamber is present. It is important for us to understand that, one, we can't do this alone. It will take best practices, greater efficiency, and hopefully without increasing costs, because utilizing and being a part of the digital economy will help a whole lot. It is also important. Now, when I'm speaking here, really I was speaking really not as the executive director of BELTRAIDE, but as the executive director of BELTRAIDE now, just to bring that in. I can see where EXPORTBelize, I can see where Belize invests, I can see where the Small Business Development Center and even our Training and Employment Center. Working closely, finding out what are those procedures. What does this new customer really want? How is this the country that I want to export to? What are they doing in order to meet the demands of the new customer? Because I must be aware of those procedures. And if I'm aware of those procedures, it helps me in some form of customization and ensuring that my strategy will help me when this recovery takes place, but I'm preparing now because I am proactive. It will be important that we do so. And I think I will stop there for now.
Yeah, I think we've exhausted our time there, Doc. Thank you very much. I'll move on to Dr. Sinanan from the Manager Competitiveness and Export Promotion from the Caribbean Export Development Agency. Dr. Sinanan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very Very much. It's indeed a great pleasure. Thanks for inviting me to BELTRAIDE.
Well, nice to have you here. Let's begin by explaining CEDA a little bit. What are the services, platforms, and initiatives being undertaken by CEDA for exporters?
Okay, well, I had a presentation prepared, but I very much like the flow of the conversation that we're having, so I'm not going to burden anyone with putting slides on the table. But I have the slides, and I'm guessing the team at BELTRAIDE can probably share it with all participants afterwards. But just to start, the Caribbean Export Development Agency, we are the regional trade and investment promotion agency for the CARIFORUM region, which is the 14 CARICOM member states and the Dominican Republic, of which Belize, of course, is a member. Our job is to really work towards improving the export competitiveness of the private sector, both goods and services, within the entire CARIFORUM region. And we do this through 4 main areas. One of them is export development, whereby we build the technical capacity of private sector firms in the Caribbean via training programs, via technical assistance, via consultancies. We also work heavily in export promotion. So when a company has built that export capacity and has that technical know-how and can service a foreign market, we actually take them out to market to get customers and buyers. Because we're funded primarily through the European Union, we tend to focus on the European market. But we do export promotion activities across the world. Another area that we're heavily involved is in access to finance. We recognize that access to finance, if you were to poll any small and medium-sized enterprise in the region, 9 out of 10, probably 99 out of 100 will say that access to finance is their biggest challenge. So we try to work with the private sector to provide access to finance solutions. We do this through our direct assistance grant scheme. We also work with a network of angel investors in the Caribbean as we're trying to introduce private equity financing as an option beyond the traditional banks and the traditional credit unions and the traditional lenders, which small and medium-sized enterprises tend to have a little trouble accessing. We also work very closely in market intelligence. Dr. Almendares, who's a member of the Caribbean Export, the Board of Directors of Caribbean Export, we try to provide the necessary market intelligence and information so that private sector firms can make, legitimate and informed decisions when trying to sort out a crisis like COVID. Information is important. What's happening, what's not happening, what are the trends, what will be the wave of the new normal. It's important that businesses understand that, and Caribbean Export tries to provide that information in terms of market trends and data and analysis. So in a nutshell, that's what Caribbean Export does. I'll stop there in terms of what Caribbean Export does. I'm not sure if you have a follow-up question. You're on mute, Kay.
I'm muted again. Yeah, I do have a follow-up question with regard to your external and regional viewpoint in particular. How do we trade differently? How do we, this is a whole new atmosphere, we're all figuring it out, but how do we do things differently now?
Well, very, very good question. And I think that's really the crux of the matter. I was speaking at another webinar earlier this week, and someone had a comment that I thought was very telling. It came from a meme, actually. Memes what these young people like on Facebook and everything. It says, I think the meme was, I can't wait for the world to return to normal. And then the comment was, normal was not working. That's very poignant for the Caribbean right now. We're talking about the new normal because the old normal wasn't working. I think what the COVID-19 crisis has brought to the forefront is something that we've been saying for many, many years throughout the region, I'm sure Belize included, is that because we are small economies, we have all been vulnerable. We're vulnerable for the external shocks. And usually those external shocks used to come in bits and bunches, global oil prices, hurricanes. But this crisis has taught us that we cannot continue to do business how we were doing business previously. We have to look at changing the way we do business in the Caribbean. Many of our Caribbean nations are too heavily dependent on one or two main sectors, primarily the tourism sector. And we know the tourism sector will be most you know, the last sector to recover from this crisis. In Trinidad, where I'm from, they were so heavily dependent on oil and gas prices that when oil and gas prices plummet, it had a negative effect on the economy. And we're seeing that right now. So what we have to do, both on the private sector side, as well as the public sector side, as well as the business support organization side, we have to look at changing up the way we do business going forward. And this COVID-19 pandemic, you know, I'm always an optimist, is a good starting point for us to do that, to start to, as we said, as the buzzword that we're using, to pivot into these new sectors. And Dr. Almendarez, I think he had a number, if I were to show my presentation, a number of the things that he covered included in my presentation. One of which is digital. We have to look towards digital and the way we do business. Because the world has been pivoting towards digital business and online business for a long time. And the Caribbean region has lagged very, very far behind for a number of reasons. You know, we don't have the necessary legal and policy framework to govern digital business in the Caribbean. We don't have the payment structure in place. We are all, you know, we're so disconnected because of the way we are, you know, island states. Shipping and transportation and logistics presents a major hurdle in terms of being competitive, in terms of doing digital business. And I thought it relevant that in the 3 months of this crisis, online business and digital business are the only businesses that have been growing because everybody's at home and everybody wants their products and services delivered to them. If we had that infrastructure in the Caribbean, there may have been a way for us to sort of mitigate the risk associated with this crisis. So I think it's important that Caribbean businesses, the private sector, the public sector, and business support organization make that shift towards trying to do business online and do business digitally. Now is the time we have to start to invest. We start to understand what are the challenges and how we can get around the challenges. And we have to start supporting the private sector in doing businesses online. I think it's very important. And I think, you know, that brings us to the whole idea of innovation. We have to become more innovative in the Caribbean in terms of how we do business. For a long time, we focused on doing business the traditional way. You know, wholesalers, exporting, selling to retailers, retailing. That's going to change now because the impact of this crisis will be felt long after we get a vaccine. Persons are going to look differently about how they transact business with one another. They're going to cut down that face-to-face interaction and they're going to try to pivot to more digital business to reduce the risk that we've seen in the crisis. And it's a good opportunity for the Caribbean region to get on board with that. How we're going to do it is going to take a much longer than the 10-minute time that I have to talk about it, but it's something that we have to consider. You know, we have to look towards risk management. Many businesses in the Caribbean, we don't plan for risk. The business support organizations do not support risk management. What will happen, I mean, this crisis is very much in one direction, but what will happen when markets experience these types of shocks? When, you know, there's a hurricane, when our clients and our suppliers are not able to purchase on the same levels, how as a business can we easily pivot our resources to another area? You're seeing, for example, you're seeing a lot of businesses, because they can't sell, you know, a lot of fashion designers, they're moving towards making masks now because they recognize masks are what's needed. Similarly, some businesses are pivoting towards doing, cosmetics companies are pivoting towards hand sanitizers because they are seeing the demand is there. We have to plan that if we have to put in place contingency measures as a private sector, that if things like these were to happen, you know, we can easily shift our resources into new areas and diversify the product portfolio and the service portfolio that we have. You know, there needs to be a movement towards market intelligence, as I mentioned earlier. You know, we have to start as Caribbean businesses, look at what's going on in the global environment and make decisions, learn how to anticipate, learn how to, you know, work. And I mean, this is something that business support organizations can provide. How can we anticipate the challenges and the trends that are happening in the global environment and make our business and work our business towards it? For example, the digital business and the mechanization and everything. Have we in the Caribbean been pivoting towards that significantly, or have we been just taking a wait and see approach and only waiting for when things like this happen that we start to scramble to try to get where we need to be? And also there needs to be a proper access to finance. And that's something that I feel very strongly about. We have to support the private sector as business support organizations in, anticipating these trends and supporting them in becoming more adaptable and more resilient when it comes to pivoting our business. These are just some of the areas that Caribbean Export are working towards. I'll just speak briefly about some of the ideas that we have coming up. Over the last couple of months since the crisis has unfolded, Caribbean Export has been making that shift into how we do business. We're sort of moving towards the webinar concept and the virtual meetings concept and the e-learning concept. Is it now necessary that we put together a private sector business persons, we put 15 in a room and we take an entire day to deliver training materials to them? Is that something that can be done more efficiently given what the crisis has taught us? The trade show model, we were planning to take part in a number of different trade shows this year, but all of those trade shows have effectively been canceled. Can we now transfer that same business-to-business meetings and those business-to-business engagements? Can that be done on a virtual level? And if it can, what needs to be done in the private sector to fulfill that those virtual meetings? As well as e-commerce. What are we doing to promote e-commerce in the Caribbean? Can we, Caribbean Export, work with the stakeholders to sort of develop a model that works for e-commerce in the Caribbean? These are some of the things that we're pivoting towards. In terms of access to finance, we have our direct assistance grant scheme. Right now, we're working towards launching another call that will take place sometime in July for grants. And we're seeing, because of the COVID crisis, we recognize that the private sector may not be able to uptake with the traditional DAGS model. What can we do to make it easier and more relevant for the private sector? These are the things that Caribbean Export are taking into account right now. So that's essentially what we have planned. That's essentially how I see the new trade unfolding. We have to look towards more innovative, digitally based platforms and ideas in order to keep trading at the level that we had pre-COVID. Those are my 2 cents. I'm not sure if there's any follow-up or if I ran out of time, if I have anything else.
With regard to, before the timekeeper pops up, quick question for you. You're out in the Caribbean, you're seeing all the various islands. How do we differentiate ourselves? How do we differentiate in promoting ourselves? How do we differentiate and attract a market?
Well, we differentiate based on what our competitive advantages are. In the Caribbean region, we have a number of competitive advantages that differentiate what we offer in terms of what is offered around the world. Too often we try to play in the same space and we run into competition. We try to run into competition from persons who do it cheaper and do it more efficiently. So what we have to do is to try to look inside and what makes us competitive and how can we take advantage of and carve a market out for the Caribbean region that can really benefit us even in times of crisis. For example, let's look at the tourism sector. We know that tourism is going to be very, very hard hit, and Caribbean islands are going to have a tough time recovering because one, you have all these restrictions now in terms of travel, and two, when these travel restrictions are lifted, is anyone even going to come to the Caribbean? Is anyone going to be traveling? And we're going to be competing with a number of different tourism destinations who are all trying to attract the same client. So for example, will a person in the US in New York, will they want to come to the Caribbean or will they want to go to Las Vegas and support their own American tourism product? We have to start marketing ourselves about what makes us strong and why persons should come to the Caribbean when the tourism market picks back up. And what we can find is that if you look at the health data that is being put out on a daily basis, the Caribbean region has, for the most part, really done well in controlling the spread of COVID. Many of the islands now are COVID-free, quote unquote, because there are no active cases. Maybe that's a good selling point for when the tourism markets opens, that, we were able to control the spread of COVID. The islands are COVID-free. You can come to the Caribbean. We have our protocols in place, and you can vacation knowing that your health is safe, relatively safe compared to other compared to other places. And we have a product that, you know, it's outdoors, it's fun, you can maintain that social distancing. Maybe those are the things that we have to look at. On the good side, you know, we have all the different products and you know, our pepper sauces, our indigenous products. These are things that we can continue to differentiate ourselves and just change the way we do business. So rather than try to sell it in traditional ways, we try to sell it in different ways. So that's essentially my 2 cents. We have to look at changing the way we do business and doing business in areas that we are strong in. And Dr. Almendarez is very correct. We have to introduce value and join the value chain so that we can bring value to the Caribbean. I think you're on mute. Okay.
This is becoming a bad habit of mine. No, but thank you for joining us. Thanks for that. And what we'll do now is we'll move to Mr. Mario Umania. He's the lead trade and competition specialist for the Trade and Investment Division and Integration and Trade Department of the Inter-American Development Bank. The IDB has had a long partnership with us as well as CEDA has. And so it'll be good to hear from you today too, Dr. Umania. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ms. Menzies, and thank you to all the colleagues from BELTRAIDE and also the participants from the private sector in Belize. Good to be here and try to share with you some of the things that we are observing from the EB side, and I do coincide with many of the things that Dr. Almendarez and Dr. Sinanan mentioned, but I will try to go a little bit more in depth in a couple of points. And let me share with you all. I guess we need to start sharing my bio so I can share my PowerPoint. If you can switch to the normal screen, then I can share my PowerPoint, because right now I cannot share it while my bio is on the screen. So yeah, there you go. So I think I can do this now. All right. All right. Okay, do you see it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So let me go to the next one. Second. All right. So a few days ago, I was in a chat with some of my former high school friends. We maintain a chat, and one of them posted this map, which is very intriguing because it shows some of the feelings that many countries are having right now as a response to the crisis. So there's a big temptation that in times of a crisis, isolation is the best response. And if you see in this map, I don't even know where Belize is, but it may be here, this one here, or here. But you can see some, especially of the big economies, pondering for nationalistic type of policies or policy responses to the crisis. And I believe that should not be the new world order that we are all seeking, and I will try to explain why. But this is a risk. This is clearly a temptation. let's start with the bad news always, and then we move to the good news. But the bad news is that the crisis is not only a health crisis. I mean, the health crisis is sufficiently severe, for sure, but it's not only there. As my colleagues mentioned, the crisis is also an economic crisis. It's a supply crisis, and obviously produced because of the lockdowns. Social distancing have proven to be very efficient in general terms in those countries that have put in place measures. It's worked, and I guess Belize is a good example, and countries in the Caribbean have managed very well the health part of the crisis. Very few cases, active cases. In Costa Rica, although I've been out of the country for more than 20 years, but Costa Rica is also a good example of how the health part has been managed. But the problem is that the crisis is not only there. So see those numbers in terms of GDP, and of course GDP is only an imperfect indicator of what is going on, but it is one of the indicators. And according to the IMF projections, the world is going to suffer as a whole, a decline in 3% GDP, minus GDP, minus 3%, I'm sorry. The advanced economies will be hit very hard, minus 6%. Latin America and the Caribbean, 5.2%. But look at this, Belize, IMF projection, 2020, minus 12%. That is something I never seen before. Minus 12%. And that is reflecting there in terms of GDP. You can see it also in terms of the use of port terminals and the cargo. There are, according to COCATRAN, the regional entity that deals with maritime transport, almost 60% of the ports have been affected in their supply chain, and 39 have reported a reduction. I think that is going to increase. In the middle of all this, Belize is caught in not such a good fiscal situation, if I put it mildly. I mean, the deficit, which was more or less already a problem, is probably, the projection is for 5.9% deficit in 2020. And the bigger problem is the debt GDP ratio. All right, the projection to go even to climb it 115%. From right now it's around 90, or has been around 90, but it's going to increase. So that the fiscal space that the government could have to put resources in the economy to combat the crisis. As, for instance, many of the developed countries are doing, if not all, and substantial, a large part also of developing economies, certainly in Latin America, are also doing, pouring resources in the economy to maintain employment and try to maintain those that are more fragile. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that next year really looks much better. If you see the same projections from the same, the world is going to grow almost 6%, which is really, really big. The developed countries are going to grow less, but of course their base is bigger, so there's always much harder for them to have bigger numbers in terms of growth. So at 4.5 for developed countries is pretty good, and that's also good news for Belize, because we'll see the dependence that Belize has with the US and the UK, for instance, and so the fact that they are going to be growing faster, it's good news also for Belize. For Latin America, the growth in the Caribbean is not that big, 3.4%, but for Belize, it's 7.6% of growth, which is really, really, really huge. So now, what is the problem? The problem has to do with dealing with very few markets. So the fate of the country is in the hands of very few export and import markets, if you will. The US, the UK, and China in terms of imports, and also the US, of course, and certainly in terms of goods, perhaps good part is that a large percentage, almost totality in the export of goods, is related to food, which is good because food are the things that in general is still growing in this pandemic. Of course, in every story, there's always an elephant in the room. The big elephant here is the tourism industry, for sure. Standard estimates that Belize could be the third country most impacted in the world among tourism, which is really something, right? And the reason is very clearly there. I mean, the contribution of tourism to the GDP is more than 40% or around 40%, much higher than some of the neighbors in the region, for sure. So that's one of the explanations why the heat is so hard. Now, I also want some numbers in terms of FDI, because even though today we're focusing on exports, and in the case of Belize, exports are clearly tied to FDI and to investment in general, because of the nature of the country. This is a very small market, and most of the exports will be related to some sort of FDI projects. So for sure, I'm sorry, let me go back. The green projects are coming down. The projections, you can see it in the first graph here. So 70% reduction in greenfield projects. That's very normal, I would say, because people will investors are trying to avoid risk of new projects. However, the percentage of projects per sub-region last year at the same time has declined only a bit, and needs for new projects in Latin America in general are a little bit. So that's good news. But the fact of the matter is there's going to be a drop in the flows, certainly this year and maybe next year as well. We have statistics in terms of how some of the new projects are being put on hold, but some of them are still moving forward, and the executives are trying to adjust. Adjust is the key word in these times. But majority of them are up to the last quarter of this year. So we'll see about that. Of course, there will be some winners in terms of industries, and then some activities own for sure, like R&D. So the message for a small country, small economy like this, is that the only way to get out of this, and it has been the case even before the pandemic, is trading. But this time, trade investment will make the recovery work faster to create employment, to create increase productivity, the number of new firms, and for sure, there's a big opportunity to be part of global value chains, which is, I believe, one of the main messages that we should discuss today. Now, I think it's rosy because we know that already the sector was already the base of the economy. So why was the country not doing much better? Well, there's always an opportunity to diversify even more because currently the exports are very few goods and services, and certainly concentrated in markets. But trade costs are relatively high in the region, and the list is not an exception. But those trade costs can also be reduced. That the goods can be reduced through adequate policies. But for the effort, for the recovery effort, not only trade policies and investment policies are going to be needed, policies are going to be needed as well, like innovation, education, training. At the end of the day, we need to keep the markets open, and this Temptation of isolation, we should combat that. So where do I see the new
Mr. Romania, just to let you know, we need about 30 seconds more to wrap up, please.
Yeah. I will wrap up. Where I see the majority of opportunities is with the fact that firms have been reshoring and nearshoring. And for that matter, Belize has an opportunity, I believe. Mexico is one of the candidates right now. Receive a lot of the investment that is coming, firms coming from Asia. And Belize is very close to Mexico with one advantage. I mean, of course, Mexico is huge, but the advantage is that Mexico doesn't have a central policy and not even a central trade and investment promotion agency. Belize does have that, and BELTRAIDE is a very important agency, regionally speaking as well. So I see a big opportunity here of trying to capture some of these investment movements, and in the Q&A I will expand other ideas, but I will leave it there.
I'm going to kick off the question and answer session right now. And thanks, Mr. Romania, for your part in that. With that, I think we had one comment come in, and in effect, this came early in the conversation. The person said, government is much further behind than private sector. To get a birth certificate, I have to go stand in a crowded room for hours, and only in Belize City. To conduct land business, I have to go to Belmopan for many days, over months or sometimes years. To pay non-city property tax, I have to go into an office. Most government forms can't even be filled in electronically, much less submitted. Government should be leading the way. That's one comment we've had. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Dr. Almendarez.
Thanks, Kay. Yes, indeed. There are several things we're looking at. You see, and that is why sometimes we don't, when I say about focusing on the end user, it's important that we do so. We've been speaking about a single window for some time now, because in this new normal, a person, especially if they have to go and stand in one of these places, violating the 6 feet and all of the different things, not confirming the social distancing, it is important that I can now sit at home and with the touch of a few buttons, being able to access and actually print it, because, you know, there should be a way of, you know, having a digital signature and all of that. These frustrations take away from the way people do business, how they engage. And of course, if we're talking about that, actually factors into investment. Dr. Omania mentioned, you know, investment is the foundation of trade, because if you want to expand, and so if I can access, and these services are made less frustrating, then of course it also means that I can get rid of a middleman. You know, Ruth might believe that, I think it goes from Ruth, I think, you know, she would believe, okay, do I need to go fill somebody's pocket in order for me to get my thing quicker than it's supposed to happen? That is not supposed to be the case. We have to transform, we have to transition, and so this new normal will require digitalization of all of these services that we're working on. Yes, it will be expensive, but it's an initial cost that over the long run will derive the returns on investments for the populace.
I have to agree there. One of the things I would say, though, is rather to make sure that we evaluate the processes so that we don't digitize inefficiency, because it's easy to do that as well. If you carry current processes over to the digital space, all you've done is computerize the same set of problems. So, you know, when we go digital, that's an important consideration as well. Mr. Omania, we didn't get to talk about this when you were on the panel just now, but I feel it's important for those listening to know. Can you go into a little bit the services, platforms, and initiatives being undertaken by the IDB for exporters?
Absolutely, absolutely, Ms. Menzies. And I believe I coincide with Dr. Almendares that digitalization is a big part of the equation, and differentiation as well, as we have seen. But explain what is the IDB trying to help with, and you just mentioned, for instance, electronic single windows. In trade facilitation, I think there's so much room for improvement. There are efforts in the region already in place, single windows going on in Trinidad, in the Bahamas, in Barbados, in Guyana, and I hope there's something going on soon in Belize, because is a big part of the necessary response to support the private sector that needs this. In parallel to that, some of the countries are moving to the next step, which is the community system, which is like the single window, but from the other side of the counter, where the private sector will have all the services in a digital platform. Well, we are also doing projects to support FDI attraction, and one of the things that is more important right now is focusing first on the aftercare services of these agencies, of these IPAs, because we need to avoid at all costs the risk of firms in the country flying to somewhere else. So investment after care is a main part, and we're trying to do things with companies on that side. The other thing is with what we call internationalization of SMEs, and that has to do with how we help SMEs to fill of the market failures, and one of them is information. We have a big audience here in this webinar from the private sector. I want to ask the private sector in Belize if they, for instance, they know Connect Americas, which is an idea like a Facebook of SMEs, where SMEs get in contact with each other, sellers and buyers. We have all sorts of services, helping firms to develop white labels, to do B2B connections, to do fairs. A lot of room there in terms of how can we help, and we already have that platform. Have partners with DHL, with Alibaba, with Visa, and there's a big opportunity for the private sector to use this type of platforms. And finally, we are also doing some work in something that I believe Belize has to do much more, which is in terms of competition law, competition policy. We're sending the message is that it's very difficult to be competitive outside if your local markets are not competitive. So competition policy is also part of the equation. Some of the economists in the region are more ahead on that regard. So we're also helping with that matter. So in general, those are some of the most important areas where we're helping countries right now.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from anybody else from the audience? We have a few more minutes for question and answer, or else we can move right ahead. Well, in that case, let's head over to the private sector and see what's happening there. We'll begin with our first panelist, Ms. Marissa Longsworth, is the Vice President of Services for the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Ms. Longsworth, welcome, and we'll get right into it with you. Do we have Ms. Longsworth with us? Okay, while we try and sort out the difficulties there, let's go to our next panelist, who I do see online. Mr. Nikita Usher is the Marketing and Sales Manager and Chief Administration Manager at Citrus Products of Belize Limited. And I'm sure he'll be able to tell us quite a bit about supply chain and logistics through COVID-19. So Nick, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kay. If I could share the screen. Can you switch me over to the normal? Right.
Okay, I should mention that the private sector panelists have all been asked to discuss the impact and plans to mitigate current and future issues related to availability of inputs, availability of markets, and changing trade logistics. As Mr. Omania mentioned, the supply chain has been pretty well affected around the world, and it'll be interesting to hear from these folks just how it's been affecting us here. With regard to that, Nick is in representing Citrus Products of Belize. He can speak specifically to citrus, but he also plays a dual role as president of the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, so he gets a little bit more insight than most of us do. So Nick, you were having issues as well?
Yeah, coming on. How do we get to share? Okay.
Okay.
Good. Hearing me, Kay?
Perfectly.
Okay. I was asked to do a presentation on Citrus Products Belize, and where we are with regards to COVID, and I trust that you can see your screens. I've tried to put together just a little bit of background for the benefit of the audience, who we are, what we do. There we have our companies listed in terms of all the companies. We are both a growing and a processing side of business. We're in the value add side as well as the core processing side of business. There's an investment arm called Citrus Products. There's the agricultural unit, which we control about 7,500 acres, which is just about 25% of the industry total. There's two processing arms. which is the Belize Food Products, which is now been converted as a primary processing unit. We do citrus juices in there, concentrate, pulp cells, all the byproducts. There's nothing that is wasted. That was formed in 1963, as you can see. This old one, Citrus Company of Belize, have been decommissioned, was formed in 1948. No longer does that line of juice. I will discuss what we do with that. Now we've been looking at converting that into another plant. Discuss that down the road. There's the value-added plant, which does the bottling and tetra packing of all the retail side of the business. That was formed in 1986. And then there's the new side, which was a recent one added 2008, which is the citrus feed side, collecting all the solid waste and converting it into a product that is used by our cattle herders or animal. Where do we go? As you can see, primarily our market is in CARICOM, between CARICOM and Central America. CARICOM taking up the bulk of that, of course. 43% of our products are moving into CARICOM, 30% into Europe. Belize only constitute to 11%. The US is 14%, and Asia is 2%. Asia is growing because since just prior to COVID, we've been seeing a number of hits coming out of India, China, Korea. So we suspect that by the time 2020 is over, this 2% could change substantially from where it was before. What products are we doing? Just for the purpose of what we're doing. 2019 is in blue and the 2020 is in green. As you can see, 2019 for FCOJ, that leads, it's almost similar to what we did last year. FCGJ, that's grapefruit concentrate. And then of course the juices, you can see a slight increase in that. All the byproducts have been put together. That's all the oils, essences, delaminines, pulp cells. Everything that is extracted is actually bulked up as byproducts. And the value-added plant, if you notice, is still on the market there. What has been becoming a big push for us is the citrus peel, which we're moving substantially across the globe. And you can see from 2020, that has now increased from where we were last year. Export chain, packaging material, what has happened to us, or the impact that it has posed on us since COVID-19. Packaging has now become a little challenge. The bulk of our packaging comes out of Central America and the US. And so that has become a little challenge for us in that you don't get it as readily as you used to have it before. So your planning on having materials available has to be done a little earlier than what we were accustomed to. When a delivery from Costa Rica could have been within 3 to 5 days, that might not be possible now. And that has not been possible over the last 6 weeks. As a matter of fact, what used to be a road transportation has now had to be reverted now to ocean. So those have been some of the challenges. Dr. Mandaris alluded to, or Dr. Omana alluded to nationalization, and what we've seen in the US, particularly what we used to receive from them as raw material or as packaging material, in many instances, they have now minimized the amount that can be exported out of the US to keep it at home. And so we have been forced to try and look at other market suppliers of packaging materials. That has been the recent over the last 6 weeks. Freight has been disturbed. Ocean for us, you don't get as many vessels as you used to get before. So that we have to manage now. Again, you got to now be managing supplying. When you used to manage on a 6-week supply chain, you now have to be thinking of 8 to 12 weeks going into CARICOM particularly. Inland has been affected, as I explained earlier. Some of our raw material also comes out of Costa Rica. That has been disturbed because, again, the road transportation there has been a challenge for us. Korea has also been affected. That's because of airlines industry. We don't have as frequent as movement of courier as we used to do, so our documentation has to be done a little earlier than what we had previously been accustomed to. Typically, we would send out couriers 3 times a week. Now we're just barely doing once per week because that's all that is available. So those have been the challenges. Impact of COVID, the international lockdown, what has it done? It has limited our product exportation. And that's because when we used to export that percentage that I shared earlier, with a lockdown internationally, what it has done for us now is the marketplace have now declined, particularly looking at CARICOM. That's because of the tourist side of the business. When a customer would have been accustomed to 5 to 10 containers per month, they have now requested that we have now only shipped 5 or only 3 in some instances, 1 per week. That has now created increased holding costs for Belize as citrus products I'm speaking about, because now we must find somewhere to hold that. And depending on how long we'll hold it for, because I cannot really stop the production flow. Fruits are coming in and you got to process. It has also increased in our interest costs, finance costs, because if I'm not moving product, then it means that I have to store and production costs keeps climbing, and so your overdraft is running. It's also reduced the foreign exchange availability in Belize, because as a company, all our transactions are US dollars, and so if you're not exporting, naturally then foreign exchange then is affected. Processing and logistics. What have we done, CPBL strategy? I think it's important for us to, at this point, say because of our international certifications, the focus on food safety and defense have been primary for us from day one, even long before COVID. And so the wearing of a mask and the type of sanitization that we had to be carrying out during the COVID period, CPBL for the most part was accustomed to that. What have we had to do though is to do particularly restrictions at the visitations. So we've removed visitors' access to the compound so we only maintain our staffing. We've enhanced the entrance protocols. We've increased our education campaign in terms of what COVID is and what it's all about, so that our employee base is knowledgeable, including those at the farm level. And we've been forced to look at processing efficiencies. No, Dr. Mana mentioned trade is very costly. And for us, we have had to look at processing costs to try and make sure that we're competitive. So we've been forced to look at very seriously efficiencies, how best we can cut those costs. Export strategy, advertising campaign, we've been pushing for that, ties into some of the campaigns overseas. We've had direct contact with established distributors. We've been doing that on an ongoing basis. We've had to ramp it up a bit because going into not having a market as much as we had before, we have to find ways how do we get it back. Our strategy has to be that we continue to compete in CARICOM to make sure that we can, unfortunately say that we don't want to have the Tropicanas and the Florida Naturals inside CARICOM because we can produce as good as they have. Customer relationship, we've had to really and truly look at revisiting contract terms. Credit availability, when a customer used to be, for example, a 30-day credit or a 45-day credit, we've had to increase those. When the value of the credit used to be 100,000, for example, we've had to increase that. We've had to change payment options. A big part of that we've not solved as yet, in that customers ought to be paying us in foreign exchange, in US dollars. Paying us in US dollars because they don't have the market available to them, therefore exchange available or availability of foreign exchange in their country might be limited, and therefore they are not able to pay in foreign dollars. There's a discussion where we are pending with the central bank. How do we bridge that? The receivables are growing. At some point we'll have to decide how do we handle that. Those are the options that we have to look at. That's an easing back on the policies of central bank, which we have to have with them. Deferred shipping options, where we can hold your product for a little longer and ship it down the road. Those are options available. But having the serious discussion with customers also, if you're not going to be needing that product, it's time for you to say that to me so that I can move it into other regions and not lose that sale along the way. We've been able to do that with successfully done that with 3 customers, to divert their product that they once wanted in 2020 to divert into Europe. So that has worked, and we continue to do that on a weekly basis. Advice to any exporter, it's important to spread your markets. One market, as you can see, the collapse of the CARICOM market, how detrimental that could be to any one business if that was your only market that you're moving product to. You need to look at spreading that as best as possible. Invest in certification that is only unique to the market that you want to get into. Certification is a very costly exercise. It is, and if you left to all of them would want you to be certified with their body. Not all of them are necessary for all the markets that you go into. So specify the markets that you want to get into and tailor your certification along that line. You certainly need to look at your costs. And I go back to what Dr. Umana said. You need to seriously look at your costs, internal costs. You need to reduce those costs if you want to be competitive. Some hard decision has to be taken. Sometimes those are better than not having it. Diversification is a time for us to look at that. Where you had a plant that was able to do more than just what you were doing, it's time for you to diversify. We are at that stage now. We have taken the plant that we decommissioned a few years ago, converting that into doing other tropical fruits other than just citrus now. So we're now becoming not just a citrus products Belize Limited, but we're becoming a tropical fruit producer, looking at expanded roles in pineapple, soursop, and the list goes on. And those machinery are coming in as we speak in another 3 months to facilitate those processing. That's the diversification that I speak of. Key for us, as you notice, that Belize is only 11% of our total production. Massive on our campaign list right now is the Buy in Belize campaign. We need to promote the Belize, buy the Belize product. That will safeguard government's need for foreign exchange to try and import all those juices that we can actually produce in Belize. We're looking at transition from bulk processing now to a consumer end. Dr. Mandari spoke about knowing the customer, knowing what the customer wants. We're revising what we're actually putting on the market now. Being healthy, of course, that is important. We all know that FCG or orange juice brings for you vitamin C that is most needed in these times. And so we're looking at that very seriously. Actually, we're almost there. Secure greater market access into Central America. I don't feel like we've concentrated and penetrated that as much as we would have wanted to. I looked at Dr. Umana's presentation talking about utilizing those agreements that we have in place to its fullest. And certainly from where we sit at CPBL, one of the areas that we feel that we could penetrate even further is the Central American marketplace. I just mentioned earlier, diversifying into tropical product supplier. We're doing that as we speak. That's what we have done from where we sit. And that's all I would have, Ms. Menzies.
Thank you, Mr. Nick. I find it very interesting, things that we didn't think about, no? Your diversification, Buy in Belize campaign is certainly essential. And there's a lot going on. In other words, it seems like you guys have seen the opportunities, no? What's your view of, and we have a couple more minutes, so I just wanted to check, what was your view of how all of CARICOM will react? Will they be able to accept your product given the constraints they're facing?
Well, I know that one of our biggest challenges seems to be Trinidad, and Dami mentioned that earlier, particularly because Trinidad was so reliant on oil and to a lesser extent, tourism. That's the actual area that we've been faced with the most challenge. Trinidad has been the biggest buyer in CARICOM for Belize's product from where I sit. And that's where we're having the biggest challenge. We're having a discussion right now with, and I don't want to go into that, but counterpart funding out of another agency to fund on behalf of them, to have that come into Belize, and then they pay in local terms over the other side. So that's a discussion that we're having, but that's where the challenge is at. The product is needed, but it's the ability to pay.
Okay, thank you for that. Folks, if you have any questions, please look at the bottom of your window where it says chat, put your questions in there, and we'll be happy to pass them on to the panelists as we go. Nick, thank you for that. We'll move next to, I think Marissa has sorted her technical issues, so perhaps we can...
Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Awesome.
Thumbs
this
up.
is what I've been trying to get for the last like 20 minutes, but we're good now.
Okay, well, Marissa, welcome, and glad you've sorted it out. Marissa, as I mentioned before, is the VP of Services for the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And so I'll without further ado, as they say, go ahead, Marissa, tell us all about supply chains.
Thank you, Kay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. I am the Vice President of Services, as you can see. You just heard from our president in his capacity with the citrus industry. So I have been delegated to present some of the information on the part of the Chamber of Commerce in terms of what some of our research has shown, as well as some of the suggestions that we see necessary for businesses and that sort of thing. So if we could remove the bio, then I'll be able to share my PowerPoint presentation and get started with that. All right, here we go. And so we are going to share this. Okay. All right, so I'm guessing everybody is seeing the slideshow here. So we're going to give you, using our branding that we have for our shows, our newspaper articles and so on, the business perspective on supply chain and the various logistics related to inputs and so on. So some of the questions that businesses have had to ask, during this time include, where do I currently source all the inputs for my products or services? How much of my final product or service rely on the inputs supplied by third parties, including services such as having skilled technicians come into the country to assist with our businesses, our manufacturing and distribution points and so on in Belize? And also, what are the restrictions on export and import in Belize and the country where my suppliers are? And how does this affect my final product and service, or service, depending on what's being provided? Of course, one thing that our research showed was that the tourism product has been the #1 casualty during COVID-19 for Belize, as the prior speaker spoke about. They actually gave data to support that. Our reliability being very high on the tourism industry means that at a time when it essentially crashes, then we feel the pain of that crash. And of course, the tourism product is actually more so a collection of services that make up the tourism product. And so all along the chain and within the ecosystem of tourism, we saw that many businesses were having various issues in that prevented them from being able to produce during this time. So what are some of the sources of supply chain disruptions that a business might face? It includes natural disasters, geopolitical tensions, and in this case, the pandemic, the COVID-19, which maybe in a slideshow 5 years ago, pandemic would not have been included as one of the actual points there. Maybe it would have fell within natural disasters, but as attorneys like myself are quickly learning, pandemic might not fall within the sui generis of natural disasters, and so you'll find yourself unable to argue it one way or the other. So we do give it its own recognition at this point in time. So the top 3 goals for a resilient supply chain would be to constantly increase visibility and brand recognition, assess and properly manage risk, which is something I heard that our speaker from Caribbean Export spoke about, and be flexible to changing demand and customer needs, which was also mentioned. Being flexible as a business, being agile, ready to adjust at the drop of a hat is very necessary, which can be quite a balancing act that we'll speak about. But a balancing act in terms of the fact that you're setting up a business for longevity purposes. So you want to put processes in place that would keep you going for many, many, many years to come. Some people might think that that entails coming up with a set process that doesn't change for many, many years to sort of assure standards and that sort of thing. However, as we are seeing in a time like this, what resilience really needs and asks for is flexibility, agility, versatility, and we'll go into that. So some of the strategies for resilient supply chains that we want to look at include adopting the overall supply chain setup, doubling down on investments in advanced manufacturing technologies. I say doubling up. Adjust the operating model, redefining external relationships, and reviewing and challenging the product portfolio. So the first thing is the adopting the overall supply chain setup. So what would happen with a lot of businesses during this time and in the medium to long term, we may see that companies will start to push for multi-sourcing across regions. And this would really be to ensure that if one source deteriorates for whatever purpose, there's another source for inputs and supplies that a business can turn to. On the other hand, you might have some businesses that had several sources throughout regions throughout the world for their own goods and services inputs, and might see this as a time that they need to actually reduce the complexity of that and to simplify. Another approach could be, as was mentioned earlier, some amount of sourcing of goods within your own jurisdiction or very close by, like through a neighbor right next door. And so we have a word called insourcing that's being used within the chamber as the explanation for that kind of change, moving more towards sourcing the inputs from those directly around us so it's easier. But of course, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So as I said, taking the simpler approach might have, it might manage your complexities, but you might still be less resilient, because if that one supplier were to deteriorate for any one reason or other, then you will find that you're left in the cold, while the more complex approach increases the administrative burdens due to that complexity, but may produce higher risk resilience in the event that a supplier is incapacitated. And so doubling up on investments in advanced technologies, as so many have said before, technology, digitization, automation, using more of mechanics in the processes might actually assist with not only the keeping the supply chain going, but also the efficient use of those supplies once they reach your manufacturing facility. So of course, some of the aspects of technology would be having full supply chain visibility and traceability, so that you're able to monitor from its starting point to you where your inputs and supplies are. Also making data-backed decisions and predictions. That is very important, and I know that in some of the e-commerce platforms that are popping up, such as BELTRAIDE, one of the most attractive parts for vendors will be the ability to see constant data reports and that sort of thing that allows them to make predictions and have some foresight into how they act in the future. Increasing agility in the production process. So one of the aspects of insourcing could also be something such as 3D printing. So instead of having to look out for products produced in China or otherwise, we might be able to replicate those products using 3D printing, which could be done right here in real time. And then of course, automation, leveraging automated processes is very important. And so this now speaks to being agile a little bit more. To be agile in an ever-changing world, companies should have an operational structure that gives it the tools to react quickly and efficiently to the ebb and flow of your market, a huge degree of adaptability and flexibility at every level of the organization. So from management all the way down to your foot soldiers on the ground, and adaptable and transformative IT architecture to quickly respond to the market. So the IT, the reprogramming and so on might actually be a little bit simpler and streamlined than streamlining your staff or the mentality of your staff. So maybe just putting certain tools in place through your IT architecture might actually force some of the change that you need to see in the very short term. And you also need to have a team that can transition to operating on an almost ad hoc basis if needed, without being bogged down by outdated hierarchical structures and poor digital tools that only slow operational responsiveness. So that ties in, of course, to the one above it, that not only is your architecture adaptable, but your team must also be in a position to know that such adaptations become necessary from time to time, and that your structures will make that happen. It will actually make it work. And so I think we're moving into the last couple of slides now. The redefining of external relationships. First of all, intensifying collaboration. Your suppliers will remember which companies supported them, and customers will remember which suppliers were transparent and maintained supply. And so the collaboration and getting closer to those you work with will also become more important as a part of this whole process. Then we also have to deal with the strategic partnership aspect of it, where we look at cross-industry learning, sharing supply chain capacities, and joint push for innovation and creativity. And this part is actually very close to my heart because of the obvious inclusion of intellectual property, ownership and usage, and those sorts of things that come with innovation and creativity. So we have an example here. Milk could be produced and packaged at CPBL, for example. And so we would have the knowledge sharing, the skill sharing, and therefore the capacity building between peers, you know, like peer helping, peer mentoring, but within a business environment. And then, of course, you have to review and challenge the product portfolio, because the growth potential of a company might actually hinge upon, number one, maybe expanding the product line. Because one of the things that we have seen in bigger companies around the world is that maybe 10 out of 150 of their products might be their growth potential, but they ensure that as part of brand recognition, as part of keeping the processes going, keeping their staff going and that sort of thing, they will of course continue to sell not their highest profit products, but will ensure that they have a robust product line that matches with their brand. Also, streamlined and uncomplicated processes for accessing and using inputs, deciding what future global expansion into other markets for final products might mean to you. So for example, will you continue to manufacture here in Belize and then distribute to your territory across at the other side of the world? Or will you set up a manufacturing facility in that territory in the event that maybe you become incapacitated in Belize, but your manufacturing facility in the UK or in other parts of Europe could continue with its own inputs there without affecting you here, or without being affected by what's happening to you here. And then, of course, whether the final product or service and the way it is consumed should or can change or be modified. And so digitization comes into that. As you would know, I'm more of a services person, and so I can see how this one has worked in the media, entertainment, film, all of those aspects where it would usually be maybe a physical product, like going to a concert or getting a CD or DVD. It's now Netflix based, it's now cloud service based and internet based. And so the question becomes, how can we do something similar in the commerce and industry sectors to widen the scope of the markets and the inputs that they have to receive? And then finally, the risk assessments and mitigating steps that were taken by some businesses, some of whom that were surveyed for this are actually on this conversation now. Some of the businesses stockpiled their supplies way in advance, knowing we had a little bit of a head start when it came to COVID. We knew it was happening around the world. And so some businesses took the initiative to stockpile, put an investment into stockpiling in anticipation of what was going to happen. Some switched the modes of import of supplies, So maybe those that were getting it by road when we had the border problems may have switched to sea transport, air transport if possible. And then there were others who canceled orders for supplies in anticipation of less demand, depending on who they supply. If they supply the tourism industry, then it's a smart move to cancel your inputs and your supplies before they got here. The current hidden advantage that Belize had during this time was that we still mainly produce primary products. We rely less on foreign inputs because we're still a raw product producer. What happens there is that we have to realize that we became the supplier. We became the input provider for other countries and other companies located elsewhere. As a country, Belize was a supplier to others. And so we have to also take that into consideration, that anything that restricted, weakened, or prohibited our own movements would have had perilous effects on other products, other services being offered. And the question becomes, would they stick with us in Belize with these teething pains during COVID, or would they simply find other suppliers and move on? And so that's the presentation from the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions at the discretion of the moderator. Thank you.
Well, thank you as well. Reminding everybody, if you have any questions, please send them in through the chat mechanism just at the bottom of the window. And we will address all questions right after the last presentation, which is coming up now. By way of introduction, our last panelist for today is Mr. Otto Friesen. He's the CEO of Belcar Exports and Imports Company. And again, Otto will be talking to us about supply chain and trade logistics in COVID-19 from his perspective. Otto, welcome.
Hi, and thank you, Kay. In terms of what I had prepared to say here, basically, most of that has been said already, but I guess I can repeat and say that I agree on what was said. I also have a presentation that I will try to share here. Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay, as was mentioned already by a number of you guys that spoke before me, there's a lot of things in business that are happening. A lot of things have changed through these COVID times. And as you know, I was asked by BELTRAIDE to do this little presentation. I was given a little outline on what I should speak about. So I will give a quick introduction of the company for if there's a few of you that haven't known this before. Belcar Export and Import Company Limited is a company located in Belize. We function as a grower-owned cooperative, even though we're registered as a limited company, but our financials run as though it's a cooperative. A bunch of Belizean farmers, growers, that own the company. Right now it's around 130 active farmers. We do also purchase a lot of agricultural stuff from growers in Belize that are not directly active shareholders in the company. So we service whoever grows these products in Belize. Decisions are made by a board of directors, and this board is elected out of the pool of farmers. So they're all growers. They know what it is to produce. A quick overview of an aerial view of the company. You see on the right side of the picture, here's grain bins. We have the capacity to handle about 25,000 metric tons of corn, specifically. We'll come to the products later, but We export a lot of beans as well, and the beans are not stored on facility, they're stored on farm. Farmers will deliver them at the pace that we export. The products that we export, black eyed peas, we do about 1.5 to 3,000 metric tons annually. Light red kidney beans, 2,000 to 3,000 metric tons per year. Cornmeal, we take in about 4,500 metric tons of corn per year and process it into cornmeal and other human consumption corn products. We do also export some whole corn, have been doing it. We are also working a little bit into chia, which is a superfood. And we started into crude soybean oil exportation, which is also a product that is being produced right here in Belize. A bit more than a year ago that we started up. It's a new thing. It has had its ups and downs. We are at it right now again, even though we were out of production for a while. And the markets that we sell to, the first off is the CARICOM, and the name BELCAR stands for Belize CARICOM. The CARICOM is our priority market. That is where a big part of our products go into. But apart from that, we do actually export into a lot of other markets all over the world. We're working ourselves into servicing these markets directly, even though we still sell a lot of products through commodity brokers. A quick snapshot of market share from the beginning of 2012 to the end of 2019, which is 8 years. Jamaica being the biggest one, as you see here. Guyana follows up. Jamaica and Guyana together make almost half of our exports. And then we have Belize here. We do sell quite a bit of seed and fertilizers. We import it and sell it to farmers for them to produce, and also packaging material. And we do also purchase some grains in country and resell it, which would fall into that category. And then you see Trinidad as the next one, and Suriname. So those put together, including the Belize market, already is 75% of what we sell, or what we did sell in the last 8 years. But then if you look over the list there, it's a bunch of other markets we are selling into as well. The Middle East, you see Saudi Arabia here, United Arab Emirates has been a very good market for us as well. The US is a very good market, as you see. I say very good. Prices are very good, have been very good the last some years, but certification has been a struggle for us. And yeah, you can get a quick scan of the list. I wouldn't take the time to read it all out. Sourcing, as I said, it's a grower-owned cooperative. So basically what we export is what was grown in Belize. We do, even though we do a little bit of brokerage as well. We purchase some stuff from one country and sell it into other countries, or actually into the CARICOM to our customers. Beside our products that we export, sourcing includes packaging material, which we do need quite a bit of. And then, as I mentioned already, seeds and fertilizers. We are sourcing a specific hybrid of corn seed for the farmers here for us to be able to produce a quality of cornmeal that exceeds what our competitors have in the Caribbean, which actually allows us to hold our market there. How has COVID-19 affected us? The difficulties we've faced, staff transportation, as was mentioned, we have had to educate staff. We'd had to put things in place to keep them happy, keep them relaxed with proper information. But we've had difficulties getting them to and from work because of the lockdown that we've been through. I think all of you Belizeans know about it. We've had a few close calls with documentation where, because of, as well, Nick Usher mentioned, courier, everything slows down. A few, like if we ship a container from here to Jamaica, the vessel takes only 3 to 4 days. So you don't have a lot of time for problems with documentation. If you have a little bit of problems there, the documents are going to arrive too late at customers, so there's port demurrage at destination that will accrue. Logistics, especially at port, has been difficult with their limited schedule, getting containers in and out properly. We've also had already run into this where big customers say that their foreign exchange in their country is running low. So they have a problem keeping up with payment plans. We haven't had a lot of this, but some. Trinidad has been a problem here for a good while, but not due to COVID-19. I mean, it's generally with them. One more thing I should put in between here is we do also right now face a problem with some parts for some of our equipment out of Brazil, where they basically have a problem even building it in the factory, and they say even if it's ready to ship already, they don't have flights out right now to send it to us. We're still working. It's not a total breakdown, but it kind of gets a bit tight for us. But overall, I had a call the other day from one of the banks, and they were asking me about all of these impacts, and I told them that it feels almost wrong. For us at Belcar, well, actually, this guy was asking me, are you returning back to normal already, or on the way back to normal? And I said, yes, we are. But for us, returning back to normal is slowing back down. Seeing all these companies, especially the tourist sector, almost collapsing and a lot of people losing their jobs and all of that. What we have seen from March to now is that we started running around the clock instead of just doing long days. And the reason for that is we are producing the basic food products, which are the last ones that people will stop buying. And I have to say, along with that, Ministry of Food and Agriculture has done a fantastic job in making sure that these food mills are able to keep running, which has been a big help to us. March is usually a high season for us because February and March is when the beans are harvested. So that's when a lot of our production starts. So what happened now is simply the panic buying that happened, and it did not happen only in Belize. We had people in the Caribbean ordering a lot more than they usually would. We even had customers in the US calling us and saying that they need a lot more orders than usually because they said everybody is staying home in the US. So instead of going to restaurants, what they do is they stay at home and cook beans. Yeah, it has been, for us, it has been more like a boost in production than a downfall, but I clearly see, as we've heard today as well, that we're not out of the woods. I mean, this whole pandemic, the way it's affecting the whole world, like Nick Usher mentioned, logistics, shipping, is one of the things I'm really concerned about. If the whole economy is going to be affected to the point where shipping schedules will be disrupted, the product we are shipping is sort of semi-perishable. There is a limit on time for it to be on the water or in ports. So that could eventually turn into a problem for us. Up to now, we've not had a lot of it. And the plans on continuing our exports. One of the big things that I see in this whole thing is diversifying. We have been working on, as I said, the soybean oil. We're, as we speak, we're researching into other crops, other products, so that there's a bigger assortment of products available for the farmers with a market. So in case one product fails, that they're not like hitting a dead end, as well as value adding. which I see a big thing. We've talked about this a lot. We are right now working at putting up a packaging line, or actually it's in place already. We're working on the packaging and branding and all of that to start selling our products rather than only in bulk bags or 50-pound, 100-pound products. We want to have a nice presentation of retail products that's going to be on the retail shelf, as well as looking into even ready-cooked meals. When it comes to key advice, what I would want to say here is also what we heard already. Very important to have multiple options on markets. Just to give an example of what we have been facing through the years, we've had a lot of struggles with like disasters. Weather disasters is one of the things our agricultural production is very much prone to. For instance, we had a few years back, we had a record-breaking crop in black eyed peas. The quantities were very high, but there was too much rain at harvest time, so the quality was very bad. So the regular customers, a lot of them, like the US and the Middle East, would not take that product. But because we had invested quite a bit in research to know which markets in the world take what type of product, we were able to divert that product into countries like Egypt and Pakistan, which are countries that buy products for very cheap, but not they're not so stringent on quality. So we were able to sell them instead of dump them, not that we could grow for that. And that same thing holds true for supplies. If you depend on like packing material and stuff, make sure that you have more than one option in case one fails. You're not on a dead end. And logistics as well. Know your shipping options. In case one shipping line fails, you know that you have friends, you have options to jump, and that can happen in a day or two, where you'll suddenly need. Actually, we pulled out a container out of port last week and transloaded it into another shipping line. Basically, that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Otto, thank you. We do have questions coming in, but they're for various panelists, so I'll just go ahead and go through them. The first that came in was, data is extremely important, but who will help data illiterate, with no offense intended, persons, like perhaps rural farmers, interpret and use the data? I don't know who wants to take that. I think it came from a remark that Marissa made, but any panelists want to jump in?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Doctor.
Yes, Marissa. Go ahead, Marissa.
Oh, okay. Since the question emanated from my presentation, I'll just briefly answer, although I'm sure Dr. Leroy has the better answer. But essentially, what I would answer there would be that it kind of depends on who is going to be governing or overseeing the process of transitioning into the use of data. In some cases in agriculture, which I'm sure Dr. Almendarez will mention, in the agriculture industry, for example, there is already a push towards the use of data in information management systems for agriculture. And so the government is actually conducting the training and making sure that they customize the app or the platform to make it as user-friendly as possible. And so on the other side, in private sector, if it is going to be a private business that is going to implement something of the sort, I suppose that in many ways the burden of ensuring that people understand it and use it efficiently will come from the person that is governing it and rolling it out to the various stakeholders.
And the only word I would add there, Marissa, is, and I think you have said it, I'm just using a synonym of it, is simplicity. Because, you know, really, if you are working with farmers and you talk about the things that they know, it makes it easier for them to understand. And I'll give a quick example. I once did a project with some fishermen, and I had to teach them financial management. And what I did was to use their boats, how much bait you needed to have, and all of those things. And I built profit and loss statements and things like that. It's the same way. You plant, you buy seeds, and all of those things. You yield, and even if you don't want to use the word yield, things grow. But you'd be surprised, as long as you make it, because they can relate to it, it makes it much, much easier for them to understand. But too often, you know, really, that's why they always say, know your audience. And this is basically a case of that.
Okay. Anybody else? Good. Thank you, Doc and Marissa. Next question. Should Belize double its exports to Central America?
Let me take that one, if I may. Sure. I mean, Belize has to increase exports as much as it can. Certainly, Central America is a closed market right now, with some limitations that were mentioned in terms of logistics and road transport, because there are issues, especially between the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica right now. There are alternative means of transportation. If you're going to Costa Rica or Panama, there's going to be a maritime service from El Salvador, I believe, starting this month or next month. But having said that, the Central American market is a good market for Belize. You have to consider that many countries in the region will be producing or are producing some of the same stuff in terms of agricultural products that you guys are exporting. So that's also a challenge in terms of differentiation and things. But for sure, there's a need to increase exports everywhere. And Belize has already a very solid service-based economy, not only because of tourism for sure, but also because of things like BPO. And I think one of the good things derived from the crisis is that the emphasis in services is going to be enhanced, because the consumer can consume services even from the lockdown. So I think that's something to put a lot of attention as well in terms of services development in the short term.
If I may add to that, if I may just add to that, though, the challenge is, for example, you know, we're a member of CECA, but not a member of CIECA. So we're not a part of the whole economic integration, which makes it even challenging. Take CSME. You can freely trade, you can move people, etc., because of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. We have a partial scope agreement with Guatemala, even though there's asymmetry in trade. But when it comes to Central America, yes, there is a need for increased penetration. And it would take up, not only that, it would correct some of the logistical issues like transportation. That's how we were sold. Now, we did a benefit cost analysis on economic integration, and the cost was greater than the benefit at that point in time. But of course, now you're looking at proximity. And because of the closeness, it would help us indeed to increase penetration, or market penetration there. The challenge is that we have also explored the possibility of partial scope agreements with Salvador and some of these other countries. And for some reason, it didn't work out, because the very word asymmetry that exists in terms of size of economy and things like that, those things pose some of the problem. But maybe now is the time for us to become even more active and try to see how we can arrange it even before maybe the establishment of partial scope agreements. But those, as you know, are some of the easier avenues in order for us to get tariff reductions, and things like that.
Okay, good. Thanks for that clarification, Doc. Next question. Can you describe what kind of mechanism using for making payment on your export as a product to the company imported as your products directly to the consumer? That will be the case. Thanks. I think that was happening, that came in while you were talking, Otto. Regarding mechanisms for making payments on your exports.
Our case, for the most part, we are selling to wholesale importers, which would then unsell to retailers, and they will pay us with US dollar wire transfers. We are working ourselves a little bit more into the retailers directly, depending on which market, which countries we are in. We are working on a retail depot or a wholesale depot on our own in Grenada. And if that works out well, we're looking at moving that into other countries.
Yeah.
We use both options. We're using direct to the retailer as well as to agents, depending on what part of the region we are going into. But I think a good part of what must be told to anybody who is interested in going into export, local chambers in the respective zones is important for you to be in touch with, for you to understand, know that customer that you're dealing with. Because if you're starting as a fresh business, going into business with that individual, you need to know who you're going to be doing business with. And so it's always important to know that. And we have found over the years that the local chapters of Chamber of Commerce have been able to assist insofar as just be able to guide us of that person's, that business background. What we have done in the past is that for new businesses, we don't go into a credit term arrangement until after we've developed business over a period of at least 6 months. And then we develop that trend from there. But it has been telegraphic transfers, in some cases letter of credit, but for the most part telegraphic transfers with a credit period that you have established over a period of years.
Okay. Do you, sorry, Nick, quick, do you carry any kind of risk insurance on that?
Yes, sometimes we have to. We've had 1 or 2 times where we've had to really execute on the insurance that we have. But for the most part, we've not had that over the number of years. We've not need to utilize it as to its fullest. But we have had 2 cases, yes.
Okay. Next question is closely tied in. Somebody suggested, since foreign exchange is a global problem, should we be looking at product exchange rather than currency for product? And Nick, I saw where you responded that product exchange will require the blessing of central bank GOB. Currently, all exported products must be paid in US dollars by law. But law aside, what are your thoughts on that suggestion?
Which was the discussion that I had alluded to earlier when we were discussing Trinidad. And as I said, I don't want to go into detail, but that's one of the options that we have to meet with central bank with. The minute you put a export entry at customs, that is linked to what is called an XCH2 form that goes to central bank. So central bank now knows that a product has left the country and central bank is expecting return on that export. If you don't deliver on the return, meaning foreign exchange coming back to country, every quarter they do an exercise with us as exporters to go through reconciling what you exported versus what inflows came back. And that's where the challenge will be. So it is for us to sit down now with government to say, I have a receivable that is capping $1 million+ in Trinidad. They can't suffice because they're lacking in foreign exchange. Can we receive that in local currency and exchange that for this one-time situation? That's going to be a discussion, and I don't know that answer is going to be yes, but we have to ask. That's where we are. And I'm sure that Otto is going to be faced with the same thing if you continue to have shipments over and beyond what is your contract period. Remember, I discussed holding costs for us. It's a discussion that we as a management have to decide, do I hold it or do I convert it to receivables? How safe is that buyer? You've done many years of business with them. They've been a very good customer to you. Do you leave it in your stock in your warehouse or do you convert it over into receivables? That's a decision that our management have to always be thinking of on a daily basis. And this is more specific, as I said earlier, to Trinidad, not insofar as Barbados or Jamaica. Jamaica is far less affected.
Okay, anybody else want to chip in there?
This thing Nick is mentioning with central bank and that stuff, very familiar language. We have been to central bank trying to convince them to do this very same thing in Guatemala for us.
Okay. All right. Next question is, are we looking into vertical growing and aquaponics to better utilize space and be more resilient? Anyone? Yes. Otto, you represent a variety of growers. Have you heard any talk about that?
Here in the western part of the country, I know farmers are, as I said, continuously looking at other options. I'm hearing there's some interest into more like vegetable farms, but when it comes to the beans and the corn we're exporting, it's more like commercial. There is some interest, but I'm not sure if it's to the level that something huge will happen shortly.
Okay. This is probably more for you, Doc, at BELTRAIDE. How far ahead are we with the PSA with Taiwan?
In terms of Taiwan, and see, there are several things happen when you engage in any kind of trade agreement. One, you have to first lodge it at quoted as it comes for trade and economic development in Guyana. And then once they give their blessings, you go through the process of negotiation, because it must ensure that I cannot treat you better. I mean, I cannot treat the Taiwan, whoever you're trading with Taiwan or negotiating with, better than anyone in CARICOM. The negotiation has taken place, and as far as I'm concerned, both parties have, well, you can't really sign off on it. What has happened now is that any country in CARICOM at a quoted meeting can simply say, I disagree with this clause, I disagree with that there, because Taiwan might be treated better than I am, and they can basically suspend or cause an agreement to be suspended. And that's where we are. I think the iron with the kinks now, one country was Jamaica, I think the kink is now with Barbados, but hopefully that gets ironed out ASAP, and then this should come into force.
Okay. Well, hopefully not too long. And I saw a comment from Jody Williams at Murray Sharps. We are focusing on USA and Japan at the moment, since it's our two biggest markets and we get a higher margin. For Central America, the logistic costs are very high and margins are lower. I think that was that benefit cost analysis you mentioned, no, Dr. Almendares? Well, I have one small question for whoever, but particularly Nick had brought up the issue of certifications and said one comment he made was that when it comes to certifications, try to choose the types that will allow you to go to most places. Everybody has their own specific, but where you can broaden out better. Particularly with IDB and CEDA being present today, is there any assistance for exporters who would want to, well, potential exporters who would want to move their product out but need help with certifications and need advice on it?
Yes. In the case of the IDB, we do have programs in various jurisdictions where we're helping exporters to deal with some of the things that relate to market access, and certainly certification is one of them. You can have, in some of the markets, you can have zero tariff, but if you don't comply with the other requirements, and some of them have to do with certifications, then you have a big barrier. And this has to do with standards. It has to do with phyto and sanitary and animal health. And there's lots of moving pieces in it, because you need a quality infrastructure, a national quality infrastructure in place. You need labs, and you need to refine the certification processes. Some of these certificates are also becoming digital and are going to be used in the single windows of the region. So there's a lot of room. The issue we have with Belize right now is the fiscal space. The fiscal space is certainly very small, and we'll have to see if there's room for a project that would boost exports and including things like this, or if there's also room for technical cooperation, which of course is a smaller type of project and non-reimbursable. But we do have projects in several countries dealing with exactly that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, on Caribbean Export Center as well, we have when it comes to certification, we have previously offered assistance both on the technical side and the financial side. On the technical side, we've executed projects designed at building technical capacity in different certifications, such as, for example, HACCP. On the financial side, we assist on the financial side through our direct assistance grant scheme. So a firm can apply to our grants to obtain, in past it was 50,000 euros, to help and product certification and standard certification were part of the grant scheme. And as I mentioned earlier, we have another call coming out. It should be coming out sometime in July. So a firm that's looking towards the certification process can apply for financial assistance under our direct assistance grant scheme.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Couple of comments have come in while we were talking. Perhaps Chamber, this is for you, Marissa, as the representative of the Chamber today. Perhaps Chamber should organize discussions with Central Bank and a group of exporters together rather than them trying to bargain individually for product exchange or local currency exchange. And also a welcome comment from Shahir at BELTRAIDE. BELTRAIDE would also be willing to help with organizing the discussions with Central Bank. It needs to happen. So there you go, export folks. Look to those two bodies to see about organizing a meeting to make this happen. If there are no more questions or comments from anybody, well, I think it's been a fairly dynamic panel today. Many thanks to all the speakers who took the time to participate. And it has been a pleasure to be your moderator today. And hopefully we can have some good news coming through soon and some updates for each other. Because if we're going to move forward as a country, the more we can communicate and exchange information and knowledge, I think the further we'll all move along. So folks, thank you very much for joining us. If there's nothing else from my bosses at BELTRAIDE, we'll just go ahead and call it a day.
Thank you very much, Kay, and thank you all.
Yes,
indeed, but these conversations have to continue.
They do. They do, and the exchange of knowledge and the collaboration is critical.
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah.